welcome to the shop. Today I got this package in the mail and I thought to myself, this would be a perfect project to do a video about, because there's so many rusted planes out there that everybody kind of needs a hand in seeing if they can be put back in order or not, or how to do it. And so I thought, because when I opened up this box, and I knew from the beginning what was coming, so that wasn't an issue, but when I opened up this box and I saw the two planes inside it, I realized that these were really super rusty, maybe even more than I thought they were. It also had some other problems. One of the blades had been ground down on the top in the middle of the logo to make a 1/4 inch blade out of the opposite end of it. So I had to reform that into a round. It's not as good as an original, but it'll cut as good as an original. It's just not as attractive having the logo gone, and it's no good to collectors. But there are two planes. One is in 182, an iron Rabbet plane, and the other one is a 191 iron Rabbet planes. Although John Walter's book refers to one of them as a possible use could be a fillester, it has no fence, so I don't consider that a fillester. I really think of that more as just a Rabbet plane. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean one plane and then the second one and try to show them to you in that order so that you can sort of see what steps I'm taking for which plane as I'm cleaning it up, because it's a repeat process. I would do the same treatment to the first one as I do to the second one, but I'll try to show them in the stages so you can watch one and then the other, or not have to watch the second one. But take a look, see what you think. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you get something out of it. Other than that, let's get busy cleaning them up. Now they make all sorts of creeping oil and stuff. I happen to like the Aerocroil, but I don't mean it as an advertisement, but it's excellent stuff. But you see, this screw here was able to come out easily, but this one's not. So before I force that, first I get a screwdriver that fits the slot, so there's no pivoting. But secondly, I don't want to just force that out, because it could either break the cast iron or it could ruin the thread. So a little bit of this Aerocroil there, and it will seek the lowest point, and it will go into these little tiny creeping holes. And I'll spread the back as well. It does not hurt to get this stuff all over your plane. It really, if anything, it helps a lot. Now what I'm going to do is put my screwdriver in there, and usually I'll wait a little longer, but we'll see how this does. We'll give it a little bit of a pressure. And it's turning. I'm not afraid to continue, but you don't want to it's working out pretty well. But normally, in some cases, you would not want to put too much pressure on it because you could twist the screw and you won't get another one of these easily, because Stanley had their own taps and dies, so these holes don't match others. So this over to the buffing wheel and I'll show you. Doesn't take much. So one of the most important things when you're doing the dismantling of the planes is to make sure that your screwdriver fits properly into the slotted screw. You see, this one here is too big, and if you use this on here, even if you force it, you're going to tear up the slot on the screw. So make sure that when you're taking apart the planes that you put a screwdriver, feel it loosely, make sure it's seated nicely, and then apply good pressure and turn it slowly. You must apply the pressure because if you don't, it will skip out and then damage that screw. So first I want to show you that what I use is the wing off of the table saw as my flat bed to put my sandpaper on, and I make sure there's no dust on top of it or underneath the sandpaper before I get started. Then I use this safety tap, or safe tap, which is a tapping and drilling liquid, a cutting fluid. You take whichever piece you're going to start with. If it's this here, I start with that and I just work it like it's a stone, basically. Move that oil all around, and then once you get into a nice action, go in the direction of the metal this way. And what I'm doing right now is removing a lot. You can see how brown that oil is. I'm using this to remove a lot of that extraneous rust on the top, that powder coat. And every once in a while what you have to do is, and that's why I keep this oily rag around, is you wipe it off to see the progress you're making. And you can see that it's still not quite flat. So this is the 150 grit that I'm using, and it's not a wet or dry paper, but it really doesn't matter. It'll still take the oil on top, and the oil creates a slurry which helps in the cutting, and the same way it would on a stone with a knife. Once I get it down, I can see there's some heavy pitting here, so I'm going to take it a little further, but I don't need to take this all the way down because it's only one surface that's going to have to really meet the wood to make it work as a depth stop. And oftentimes I won't take it until it's perfectly flat all the way across, because then you're wearing down so much of your piece. If there's heavy pitting, it's not necessary to get all of that out unless you're looking for a complete restoration. And I'm not. I use these tools. So all I'm trying to do is to make sure that it's nice and functional and that there's nothing that's going to hurt my woodworking. So that's one step. Then I go up to the next paper, and I don't worry about this oil here. I'm going to leave it. And so the next one is the 220, and I'll add a little oil, and I'll go through this process in 3 stages for every part. So now you hear the sandpaper there, but when you get on the oil, you create a slurry, and that helps for it not to give too much lines into the metal. And you see, I'm just going in that direction that I would be using that with the plane, and take off a little more, and you can see I'm losing a little bit more on the other stuff, but where I've already sanded, all the marks are gone from the first sandpaper. So we're gonna move that around. Now I'm gonna go over to the third grit, which is the 600, and I stack the papers really for no other reason other than letting that oil soak in. Move that oil around a little bit and get it into a path that I can use. Now you're going to see what that third grit, the 600, does. And I haven't been at this very long, just in the time that we've been on here talking. And sometimes I'll speed up a little bit. Let's wipe it off. And to me, that is perfectly fine. You don't see any sandpaper marks or anything. I'm not looking for a gloss mirror-like surface. I don't really want that. All I want to do is to make sure that the metal is clean and there's no rust left, and it's nice and smooth so it won't scratch the surface of anything that I'm using. So that's pretty much done, except for a little bit of polishing for here, and that I do with a buffing wheel just to clean that up. I'll show you that next. Now, I know a lot of people don't like using electric tools and the unplugged clubs and things like that, but I find this to be really the best method I know of cleaning up a piece very quickly and not damaging the japanning or anything. And so what I do is I use a soft cotton wheel, and when it spins it gets hard, but it's not enough. It is enough to cut, but it's not enough to wear down the metal too much. And I use some jeweler's rouge, and I use that just to polish it up. And you see, it doesn't remove the japanning because the japanning is hard baked on. So, but to get that little bit of dust off of that rust, I just lightly, and I'm done. I also use this same method on knobs and things that has that brown rust area. What I do is I just very quickly you see with that jeweler's rouge, it just takes off that brown hazing. And this has nothing to do with the functionality of the plane itself, but more of just an aesthetic. And I should warn you, I've been doing this for a long time, and I've had pieces fly out of my hand, and it can be dangerous. So it's important before you use anything like this to really get a good handle on the way it works and not just jump right into it. So now I'm going to start on a plain body. This is a 78. This is not one of the two that I was doing before, but I had already done this before I decided to do the video. So now I'm going to show you on this piece here, and you can see there's some paint here and there's some paint here that I'm not going to clean off, but it's this top surface, and you see this is relieved beneath that. So that will be okay as long as you keep the piece flat, and that's the importance of using a flat surface underneath. So again, I just start by spreading that oil around, and what I'm doing is I'm putting pressure not up here because that would tilt it. I'm using the pressure. I got it flat on that side, so just those high spots are what's going to be taking off. So I get a good grip. Try to avoid this edge here because that can cut you even though it's not as sharp as a blade. And just work it in the direction of the plane again. And this is the coarsest at 150. And you'll see again the slurry that comes up on it and how dark that is. And that's the dirt and that's the rust that's there. And I'm not going to do this too much. It's just a few strokes. And if you do this every once in a while, you'll keep your planes nice and clean. Now I'm going to take it off this and check it out. using my oily rag, and we'll see what that did. It wasn't very much work, and you can see there's little areas in here that are shinier, and that means that this surface undulates. But you see it hasn't taken out any of the japanning here or here. I'm not getting down to that. So here we go again, the same thing, but this time we can turn it around the other way and work it that way, maintaining the pressure over here, not over here, because I don't want that tilt. So that's already looking a lot better. And I don't really want to scratch this surface up too much. So now I'm going to go on to the bottom surface. And keep in mind that you make sure that this little slitter that's here is either in an upright position and out of the way or completely off. So let's handle it like we would a plane. Put our hands on it like it's a plane. And then start nice and easy, keeping it good and flat. And just working with that lubricant on the sandpaper. And then a little bit. See how it looks. Always check, don't just go gung-ho. And you can see that it's not really cutting up here. It's a spot here and here. So I'm going to apply a little more pressure. Instead of back here, I'm going to apply a little more pressure up here. That is looking pretty good. And as I said before, I'm not trying to restore this plane to what it was when it came out of the hardware store, which probably wasn't too flat anyway, or even to the way that the craftsman who bought it had maybe milled it down to. You see I'm taking off quite a bit in the middle here and here. So I still want to keep going because there's some spots that aren't even getting touched. So we'll go one more little round here, but I'm going to go ahead and re-oil because I don't really want it to be that gritty. That's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to stop with this grit now. Well, not yet. I got to do this side. So use one grit. Now again, see that tilt? We don't want that tilt. We want to make sure it's sitting flat on these surfaces and not coming down here. So we got to make sure the pressure we put on it is on this side here. You can see how coarse that is, so a little bit more cutting fluid. There we go. Keeping the pressure over on that side where my ball of my hand is, so that I don't tip over. And still going with the length of the plane. Stop and check it out. Here's very shiny, but right here is not. So I'm going to apply a little more pressure in that upper section, that upper front section. I'm just putting these fingers here and pushing a little more there. Looking pretty good. I'm going to go a little more with this coarse grit, but not much more. Okay, I'm going to stop there and switch over to my next grit, which is the, what is that, the 250, 220? Yeah, the 220. And so we'll go back to that side we were on, that first side. We'll do it in the same order. Get some distributed. All right. Now we can see up here, it really has not touched a lot, and right here. But overall, everything else has, so that's pretty nice. Now, I haven't put a square on it yet, but I will. But to make sure I'm doing this okay, because I have to get rid of all this stuff anyway, and then square it up, just like a piece of wood. So now I'm going to switch to this, the sole of the plane, and work it, starting like I'd be using it as a plane. The way I'd hold it, and then I'm going to turn it around and apply more pressure at this end. It's looking very good. Overall, from here to here, it's pretty good. A little bit in the heel, you'd expect that to be a little worn, and this little nose is not quite there, a little spot there, so we'll do it a little bit more, getting a bit more scratching, so I'm going to use more oil, and that oil is not very expensive, so don't be afraid to use it. All right, let's turn it around, pressure on the front. Now, after you've gone through all this with a rusty one, you won't have to do this over again, and most of the time you don't have to use that heavy grit paper. So you see we have scratches here, fine scratches. We're going to get rid of that next in the next go round. And so let's hit this side here. You don't really need a lot of pressure. If you use good sandpaper, the sandpaper will do the cutting. All right. Let's see what that looks like. Still not a lot of cutting there, so I'm going to apply more pressure up there and try to get a little bit more of that out. Let's turn this around. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to move this one out because of those tears. They'll cause a little bump in the next paper, which is the 600. So nice and oiled. Spread that around. I'm avoiding this little line in the table, so I want to stay on one plating because if I don't, that might have a little bump in it and it would cause a problem. So these are nice and flat. That's looking very good. And I am not going to worry about these little dark areas right here. I just want to make sure that I'm getting rid of any kind of scratch marks. Let's do this again. And this time we'll go a little faster. Now I could take this up to 1200. I could keep going. But this is a working plane, and I just want it to be smooth. I am not trying to make this into something for a fashion show. This plane belonged to my father, and he had it since the 40s. And he passed away 25 years ago. I got it, and that's the reason for all this gray paint. He worked as a pattern maker in a shop, and not only did he want his planes easily recognizable, but able to reclaim if somebody stole it, and he engraved his name here, Spier, on the side. So we go to the bottom, turn it around so we get even pressure. Now I would say the bottom is the most important to have flat. The right and left sides, you'd like to have them at a right angle, but it's not going to make a bit of difference if they're off a hair, because this is not a plane that you would use for real precision. 78's a little more rougher, but that looks good to me. It looks very good. So let's do this far side. A little more oil there, not to tip. Now another thing, the same way you do with knives on a cutting board, you could do a rotating action or a figure eight, and that helps mask some of the marks that you get. I prefer just going with the wood this way, with the plane. That looks fine to me. Okay. So this is the 182, which is the first one I cleaned up, and I used on this side here and the bottom, and this side here, I used the sandpaper method on the table saw. If I had a piece of granite, I would do it on that, because that might even be truer, but this is actually very good, I think. And I've cleaned it out inside here. I've used that oily rag to get in here and clean out the inside, and wiped off this bottom here. And then I did the WD-40 on it just to clean off any kind of gunk that was left. And you can see there's still some little minor areas here that it didn't totally get into, and I could polish them up, but then I wouldn't be staying flat and true to the plane. Let me show you something else. This is my machinist square, and it's very true. I've tested it several times. I usually test it every couple of times I use it. They're easy to test, but if I put the square on the side of the plane here, I can see, looking down it, that this side here is not quite true to this side here, but this side is dead on. There's no light coming through. So this and this, the forward side and this side, is square to each other, and I'm right-handed. I won't usually cut off this side, and so if I really want a square rabbet, that's the way that I would use it. So that would work out perfectly. The handle came up nice. Where I buffed it on the buffing wheel, it didn't damage the Japanning at all. As a matter of fact, it just polished it, and I didn't go heavy on it. I'm not trying to make the steel between it where it had rusted come through as shiny. I just don't want I don't want the rust to sit there on it. But this had a lot of paint splatters on it, and the buffing wheel took off the paint splatters as well. So this is the one where I had to cut the blade off, and so let me show you how that turned out. It's shorter, but it still will bite and be squeezed in there, so it'll work. I'll just start looking for a new 182 blade. I hope you can see this. I've worked that off, and now all I'm trying to do, I worked off the 1/4 inch piece, came up this way, and I've taken most of that off, and I'm trying to work this top into a smooth surface, and I'm using one of my files. It's a little coarse, but I'm trying to get it so it's fairly even and that there's no dugouts. There seems to be a little one right there, but you know, this is kind of silly because I'm going to try to replace it now. Now I'm going to a finer file to refine it. Work the curve down here. And I can tell how I'm progressing because the metal gets lighter the more it's cut in. So I can tell as I go what it is that I'm getting rid of and when I'm getting to a nice flat surface. Now I have to be real careful when I rub this because there are little filings that are sticking off to the side, so there's a burr there. So you want to be cautious to keep your hands away from those. But that looks pretty good. There's still two little dugouts there, but I'm not sure I want to shorten this that much that it might not be worth it to me to get rid of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm softening the edges by filing a little bit off. So here's the piece. I just walked over to the buffer, and you can see now there's no burrs around, nothing to catch your fingers on, no fear of getting cut. And I think the arch is okay. It's similar to the original. And right there is the mark. You can see where the knob that holds it in place goes. So I do have about 3/8 of an inch left on it before I have to get a new blade, but I think that turned out pretty well. We'll put that on the plane and we'll see how it planes. So here you can see the blade is on the plane now. We're ready to cut. Everything is aligned. We're going to try some test cuts, but I wanted you to see that even though I ground off a good 1/2 inch of this blade, it's still going to function all right. It doesn't look terrible, but I'll still be looking for a new 182 blade to go on it just to make it better. So I was just cleaning out the inside here. Sometimes I'll use a screwdriver in the oily rag just to get in the corners, and the screwdriver's not digging in, it just allows me the reach, you see, just to clean out the inside. Everything on this is pretty good. This is the 191, and we'll check it also for square against this side, and that's beautiful. That is right on. And I did have to, with this one, oh, it's beautiful on both sides. I did have to compensate in my sanding. I checked it, and I realized that I may have been putting too much pressure on one side, or that it just was that way when I got it. But I've corrected that mostly on the sandpaper, and I've got the blade in here and ready to go. And this is the 191 is the wider of the two.